Letter 6. Portsmouth, October 28, 1795. Still at Portsmouth, and the Ulysses not yet come round from the Thames. Henderson and myself have received orders not to wait longer, but to repair immediately on board the Bridgewater transport, and proceed to Cork. Of this vessel we do not hear the most happy report. She is very old, and we cannot fancy her so safe as the Ulysses. We likewise hear that she is already much crowded with passengers, and that we have no prospect of obtaining even a tolerable berth on board. But, as I before remarked to you, I am prepared for all I may have to encounter, and resolved to meet whatever happens sans me plaindre. Master has not received instructions to accompany us, and we lament the prospect of being so soon deprived of his society. But we have some hope that he may again join us at Cork. Possibly he may follow us in the Ulysses, and have the satisfaction of not being separated from his baggage. You will learn with surprise that what I, some time ago, sought in vain is now offered to my acceptance. One of the physicians of the Leeward Island staff, wishing to go to St. Domingo, it has been proposed to me to make an exchange, giving him my appointment and taking his. But my arrangements are now fixed. I have a better knowledge of things connected with the service on which we are destined, and my baggage is already on board a vessel bound for St. Domingo. If, therefore, my destination be altered, I can only know it officially, for circumstances no longer prompt me to a voluntary exchange. Some troops were embarked yesterday from this place. The weather was rough and unfavorable. Such, indeed, it has constantly been since our arrival at Portsmouth, always stormy, and, at times, tempestuous. From this state of the weather we have had the opportunity of seeing this great maritime port to much advantage, a degree of grandeur being added to the scenery which, in a more tranquil season, had not existed. The general movement and activity have been necessarily increased. We have heard the deep roaring of the billows, and have listened to the howling of the wind and the beating of the storm among the shipping. The troubled waves have dashed, in heavy seas, upon the land, or broken with violence against the rampart walls. Boats and ships have been set adrift, others driven from their anchors and cast ashore, and that degree of the terrific, necessary to the sublime, has prevailed. But sublime and grand as it may have appeared, you will believe that, as we are so soon to be placed at the mercy of the restless and turbulent waters, the ideas excited by the scenery have not been of the most happy nature. A sort of relief to the dull round of Portsmouth has lately presented itself in a company of equestrians, who have opened a circus, or theatre for horsemanship, in the hope of amusing the public at more of profit than the bare support of the riders and their horses. But, in this expectation, it seems probable they may be disappointed, especially if their visit should be at all protracted. To have disregarded this only amusement of the place would have been a great neglect, but a single visit has exhausted all our curiosity. Of the spectators, no small proportion consisted of sailors, drunk or sober, and the lovely Cyprians I have before described to you. The low buffoonery of the clown, you may believe, was suited to his audience, and certainly it was as coarse and vulgar as even Portsmouth might desire. Perhaps I might say that the best part of the entertainment proceeded from a jolly tar who, in a fit of mirth, let himself down from the gallery to snatch off the fool's cap which he put upon his own head, and, usurping the place and character of the clown, desired him to budge, for he was too great a fool to keep the deck. This introduced a very ludicrous scene between Jack and the clown. The clown met the adventure as mere sailor's fun, bore it patiently, and, in his own way, endeavored to turn it to the amusement of the audience, while Jack made many hits of humor and drollery and seemed not altogether unworthy of the cap. For some time they maintained a very ridiculous and grotesque contest who should wear it, Jack repelling the rough wit and sarcasm of the clown with considerable effect. But at length the latter, observing that two fools were too much for so genteel an audience, abruptly seized the cap from the head of the merry tar, and poor Jack, thus deprived of necromantic influence, reeled off the stage a mere drunken sailor, stammering, by way of apology, "D.D., dammy, ladies and gentlemen, beg your pardon." Dbb obliged to strike, for t others the bb bigger fool. Since leaving the Fountain Inn I have lodged at the house of a widow, who proves to be a very strict disciple of the zealous and bigoted Whitfield. This poor woman has several children, who are brought up in all the scrupulous tenets of their sect, and, it being part of the system to seek proselytes, I am, sometimes, in my occasional conferences, betrayed into theological discussions with my puritanical hostess. Most commonly they turn upon the hallowed doctrine of predestination, when the scriptures are turned and twisted and tortured, and construed and misconstrued in a variety of ways, and in all the trite language and ready quotation of the sect, to exemplify the certitude of this great and universal principle, which, to minds less biased, would only seem to plead an excuse for all the bad passions of man, while it impeached the justice of a benevolent, all-wise, and all-merciful ruler. But as I always hold religion sacred, and venerate true devotion under all the various forms assumed by every class of its votaries, however misled with regard to particular tenets, I so far subscribe to the merit of the widow's arguments as to quit the topic in perfect harmony, although less impressed with the great truths she so fervently urges than her zeal for the good cause would lead her to wish. I feel, however, the satisfaction of having obtained this poor woman's esteem and gratitude, although by a circumstance less spiritual than religious, indeed wholly temporal, for it regards simply the body's support. Finding that she was often at a loss to contrive a convenient and economical dinner for her little brood, I hinted to her the great utility of rice. In reply she remarked that she often made them rice puddings, but that they were very expensive, and required much time and trouble in preparing. She did not seem to have any idea that rice, simply boiled, could be eaten, or that it could be regarded as food without the admixture of eggs, sugar, milk, and spices, and when I assured her that plain rice, merely put into a bag and boiled, made a very wholesome and nourishing diet, she smiled and expressed strong doubts of the fact. Therefore, in order to convince her, I desired that she would procure some rice that day for the children's dinner and let me instruct her how to prepare it. She did so with a sort of reluctance, believing it could not be good, not eatable. I repeated my assurances that she would find it an important article of diet, adding that it was predestined for her children to use it as a principal part of their food. This was a close specimen of her own logic and a little staggered her, but she could not tell by anticipation what was predestined. Whatever was would come to pass. This, she believed, never could. She knew not what was to be, but, like the most zealous of the sect, reserved herself to judge the case of preordination by the event. At dinner time the rice appeared, and fortunately it was well boiled. I desired them to mix with it some moist sugar and a small piece of butter, and, giving some of it to the children, begged of the mother to leave it to them to decide whether the predestination I had foretold was not about to be fulfilled. They ate up eagerly what was given them and asked for more. The poor woman likewise partook of it herself, and, to her great surprise, found it not only a good and wholesome food, but very palatable. A scene of joy and happiness succeeded, which I witnessed with the most heartfelt satisfaction, and I could not but take to myself the merit of having done a good action, although it was but the humble one of prescribing a pudding to a poor widow and her tender babes. The dear little ones clapped their hands and in lisping accents told their joy, while the thankful parent relieved a heart loaded with gratitude by expressing a multitude of acknowledgments and praying heaven forever to bless me. Now, said she, I can never be at a loss for a pleasant or a plentiful meal for my poor children. And on my putting to her the question regarding my prediction, she replied that she was not only fully convinced of the truth of it, but that she further believed it had been predestined by the Almighty that I should be sent to lodge in her house to instruct her how to provide for her infants a fit and palatable food which at all times she might be able to procure. She devoutly offered thanks to heaven for this happy event, which, she declared, brought to herself and children a degree of comfort and plenty she had not dared to expect. If I at all know your heart, my friend, however trivial it shall seem to some, this will not be regarded by you as merely an idle anecdote. You will envy me the blessing of the widow Butler and the smiles of her innocent babes.